The night my stepfather drove away from that rest stop, I stood in the parking lot of a Cracker Barrel off I-40 and watched his taillights disappear into the dark, and the only thing I could think was, he's actually going to let me figure this out myself. It was November. Cold in that specific Tennessee way, where the wind has teeth and the sky looks like dirty dishwater. I had my purse, thank God, but my phone was at 11% and I'd left my jacket in the back seat because my stepsister Rochelle had asked me to hand her something and I'd taken it off, and then everything happened so fast. Let me back up. My name is Nora. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in a house in Columbus, Ohio with my mother, my stepfather, and 2 stepsisters who came with him when he and my mom married when I was 9. For 22 years, I told myself we were a family. For 22 years, I believed that the way they treated me was normal. That every family had one person who got the short end of every joke, who got talked over at dinner, who got the hand-me-down with holiday plans and the leftover love. I thought that was just how it worked. I thought I was just too sensitive. The trip to Nashville was supposed to be a good thing. My cousin was getting married, my mom's side, not my stepfather's, and we were all driving down together because, as my mother put it, it would be nice to do something as a family. I should have known. Whenever my mother said it would be nice to do something as a family, it meant she needed me there to absorb the tension between her and my stepfather, to laugh at the right moments, to make everything feel more normal than it was. We left Columbus at 7 in the morning. I sat in the back between Rochelle and my other stepsister, Paige, which was already a problem because Paige is 28 years old and she still acts like a teenager when she's bored. And Rochelle has never once in her life said a kind thing to me that wasn't also a little bit of an insult. Within the first hour, they were going through my phone and making fun of the podcasts I listened to, calling them sad girl content, and reading my notes app out loud in voices. My stepfather laughed from the front seat. My mother stared at the road. I had learned a long time ago not to react. Reacting meant they'd found a nerve, and finding a nerve meant it would get worse. So I looked out the window and I counted mile markers and I told myself 7 more hours, and then we'd be at the hotel and I could have my own room. Somewhere around Cookeville, we stopped for gas. My stepfather filled the tank while my mother ran inside for coffee. Rochelle and Paige went to use the restroom. I stayed by the car because my back hurt and I just wanted 5 minutes of not being crammed between 2 people who found me exhausting. That's when it started. My stepfather came around from the pump side and he had this look on his face. I know that look now. I've cataloged it over the years. It's the look he gets when he thinks something is funny in a way that isn't actually funny, but he's going to do it anyway. He said, "Hey Nora, think fast," and he tossed me the car keys. I caught them. He said, "You're driving the rest of the way." I said, "Okay, sure." I thought he meant it. My mother came out with 4 coffees. She didn't say anything. She got in the passenger seat. Rochelle and Paige came back, got in the back. I got in the driver's seat. I adjusted the mirrors. I pulled out of the gas station. About 40 minutes later, my stepfather said there was a rest stop coming up. Could I pull in? He needed to stretch his legs. I pulled in. We all got out. It was a nice enough stop, picnic tables, vending machines, a little covered walkway. The girls went to look at something on Paige's phone. My mother was talking to my stepfather by the car. I used the restroom, and when I came out, I stood by the vending machines for maybe 3 minutes, looking at whether I wanted trail mix or peanut butter crackers. When I walked back to where we'd parked, the car was gone. I stood there for a moment with my hand still in my purse from reaching for my wallet, and I thought, they pulled up, they pulled around. Maybe they moved to a different spot. I walked the whole length of the parking lot. I checked the other side. I stood at the entrance and looked out at the highway, and there was nothing. Just trucks and the gray afternoon sky and the sound of wind through the trees at the tree line. I called my mother. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. This time she picked up on the second ring, and before I could say anything I heard laughing. Rochelle's laugh, which is high and sharp, and Paige's laugh, which is lower and goes on too long. And my mother said, "Surprise, baby. We bet you can't make it to Nashville on your own." And then she said something I have thought about every single day since. "It'll be good for you. You need to learn how to handle things." They had driven away. They had left me at a rest stop off I-40 in Tennessee, with 11% battery on my phone, no jacket, and what turned out to be $43 in my purse. My mother thought it was funny. That's the part that took the longest to process. She didn't think it was cruel or dangerous or something that could go genuinely wrong in about 15 different ways. She thought it was funny, a lesson, something I needed. I could hear it in her voice. That brightness that meant she was performing for an audience, that she was already thinking about how she'd tell this story at the wedding, how everyone would laugh, how it would become a family legend. Nora, who always needs to toughen up. Nora, who can't handle things. Nora, always so serious. I hung up before she finished talking. I had about 6% battery left by then because I'd been using GPS earlier and I hadn't thought to save it before all of this. I made 2 decisions very fast. I turned on low battery mode and I texted my cousin, the one getting married, the words, "I'm stuck at a rest stop on I-40. Not joking. Then I put my phone face down on one of the picnic tables and tried to think. The rest stop was not empty. There were maybe 8 or 9 cars, a few trucks idling in the truck section further back. A family with small children was loading back into their minivan. An older man with a reflective vest was doing something near the trash cans. I was not in immediate danger. I was just alone in Tennessee with $43 and no way to get to Nashville that I could currently see. I went inside to the building. It was one of those Tennessee Welcome Center stops, clean, with maps and brochures and a vending machine section, and 2 women working behind an information desk. One of them, a woman maybe 60 years old with reading glasses on a chain, looked up when I came in. I must have looked like something was wrong because she said, without me saying anything, "You okay, hon?" I told her what happened. I'm not sure why I told her the whole thing. I meant to just ask if there was a bus or a shuttle or something. But she had one of those faces that's just open, not pitying, just present, and it came out. She listened without interrupting, which is rarer than people think. When I finished, she said, "Well, that's something." She didn't say, "I'm sure they didn't mean it," or "I'm sure they'll come back." She just said, "Let's figure out what you've got to work with." Her name was Wanda. She had worked at that welcome center for 11 years. She knew the highway like a person knows their own neighborhood, which exits had diners, which had motels, which truckers were regulars, and which ones weren't. She told me the nearest Greyhound station was in Cookeville, which was back the way we'd come, about 30 miles. She told me there was a Cracker Barrel at the next exit, 4 miles up, and that it was the kind of place where you could sit for a long time without anyone bothering you. She gave me a Tennessee road map, the paper kind, the kind that folds wrong every time you try to refold it, and she wrote her direct phone number on the corner of it in blue pen. If something goes sideways, she said, you call me. I want to say I held it together. I did, mostly. I thanked her and I walked back outside and I stood by the picnic tables and I let myself be scared for about 90 seconds. Really scared, the kind where your hands shake slightly and you're very aware of your own heartbeat. And then I picked up my purse and I started walking toward the highway access road. The Cracker Barrel was 4 miles, but the shoulder of the road was wide, and there was a sidewalk for part of it, and it wasn't dark yet. I had done harder things. I reminded myself of that. I had moved to a city where I didn't know anyone at 23. I had worked 2 jobs to finish my degree. I had sat across a table from my stepfather every Thanksgiving for 22 years and smiled. This was 4 miles. It took me about an hour and 20 minutes. A woman in a pickup truck slowed down and offered me a ride about halfway through. She had a car seat in the back and a Jesus Loves You bumper sticker, and she didn't seem dangerous. But I thanked her and said I was okay. I needed to walk. I needed the time. I got to the Cracker Barrel at 5:15. It was warm inside and it smelled like biscuits, and the hostess seated me without any trouble, even though I said I was just having coffee. I sat in a corner booth by the window and I put my phone on the table and I looked at what I had. My cousin had texted back, "What? Calling you now." I let it go to voicemail because I couldn't talk without crying and I didn't want to cry in a Cracker Barrel in Tennessee. My mother had called once. My stepfather had not called. Rochelle had sent a text that said, "Lol, you good?" with the smiley face. I ordered coffee and a biscuit because I needed something, and because the biscuits were $3 and I had 43. I did the math. If I needed to get a motel room, the cheapest motel I'd seen advertised on signs was the Days Inn at exit 286 for $59. I didn't have enough. If I took the Greyhound to Nashville, it was probably going to be around $30, and I'd arrive with about 13 to my name, which was not enough for a cab to the venue, or a hotel separate from my family's block of rooms. I was sitting there doing this math on a paper napkin when a man at the table next to me leaned over and said, "Excuse me, are you waiting on someone?" He was maybe 70, with a neat gray beard and a flannel shirt, and the woman across from him had white hair and was working on a crossword puzzle. They looked like a Christmas card. He said he didn't mean to intrude, but he'd heard me come in and I'd looked a little lost, and his wife had told him not to say anything, but he'd always been what she called a meddler. His wife looked up from her crossword and said, I told him not to say anything. She told me not to say anything, he confirmed. Something about the two of them. The way they bickered in the comfortable shorthand of people who have been together so long they've become a kind of team. Made my chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with being stranded. I said I was fine. He said okay, sure, in the tone of someone who did not believe I was fine. His wife put down her crossword. I told them. Again. There was something about this day that kept making me tell people things. Maybe it was because each time I said it out loud it sounded more clearly like what it was. Not a prank, not a lesson, not something a loving family does. It sounded like abandonment. Every time I said it I understood it a little more. The man's name was Gerald. His wife's name was Helen. They were from Knoxville, heading back from visiting their son in Memphis. And they listened to the whole thing the way Wanda had. Without interrupting, without trying to fix it before I'd finished. Without making me feel like I was being dramatic. When I was done, Gerald said, Where are you trying to get to? I said Nashville. He said, Well, Helen, looks like we're making a slight detour. Helen said, I told him not to say anything, but since he did, yes, get your coat on. I didn't have my coat. I told her I'd left it in the car. She reached into the seat beside her and pulled out a cardigan that was folded next to her purse, dark green, soft, and put it on the table between us. You can keep it, she said. I have 12 more at home. Gerald says I have a problem. She has a problem, Gerald said. I put on the cardigan. I paid for my coffee and my biscuit. I got into the back seat of their Buick, which smelled like cinnamon and old books, and Gerald drove us toward Nashville while Helen asked me questions about my life. Not about my family, about me, what I did, what I liked, whether I had people in Nashville I trusted. I told her about my cousin. I told her about the job I'd just taken, a coordinator position at a nonprofit. The first job I'd ever had that felt like something I'd actually chosen. I told her I'd been thinking about moving. Not to Nashville necessarily, just away. Somewhere new, somewhere I'd picked for myself. Helen said, Good, do that, Gerald said. From the front seat, she's right, do that. They dropped me at the hotel where the wedding block was at 8:15. The lobby was warm and bright, and through the glass doors I could see a cluster of cousins in the bar area. Someone already danced badly to a song from a phone speaker. I turned around to thank Gerald and Helen, and Gerald waved me off before I could get 2 words out. Helen got out of the car and hugged me, a real hug, the kind that means something, and she said quietly, into my shoulder, You don't have to go back to people who think what happened today is funny. You know that, right? I said I knew. She looked at me for a moment, like she was checking whether I actually knew, or whether I just thought I did. Then she got back in the car. Gerald beeped twice when they pulled away and I stood on the sidewalk and watched them go and felt something shifting slowly, in the way you feel tectonic things. Not sudden, not loud, but permanent. My cousin found me in the lobby. She had already heard from someone, my aunt I think, who'd talked to my mother, and she was furious in the specific way that people who love you get furious, where the anger is really just fear rearranged. She hugged me, and then held me at arm's length, and looked at my face and said, Tell me everything. I told her everything. By the time I finished, we were sitting on the floor of the hotel corridor outside her room, because neither of us had wanted to stop walking long enough to go inside. She listened and then she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, Nora, this is not the first time. She was right. It wasn't the first time. It was just the first time it had happened somewhere I couldn't pretend I hadn't noticed it. The wedding was the next afternoon. It was beautiful. Her husband cried during the vows, which made everyone cry, and the food was incredible, and I danced until my feet hurt in the specific good way. My mother and stepfather were there, my stepsisters were there. At the reception, my stepfather made a toast that was mostly about himself, which was normal. And my mother laughed at all his jokes, which was also normal. During cocktail hour, Rochelle found me by the cheese table and said, No hard feelings, right? We knew you'd be fine. I looked at her for a moment. I had been thinking about what to say for 2 days. I had run through 100 versions, the cold dismissal, the careful statement of exactly what I thought of her, the speech I'd always wanted to give. What came out was simpler. I said, I know you thought that was a prank. I need you to know it wasn't funny to me, and I'm not going to pretend it was. She blinked. She said, Okay, but you made it fine. I'm not finished. I made it fine because strangers helped me. Strangers, not my family. I've been thinking about that, and I think that's something I needed to understand. I got a piece of cheese and walked away. She didn't follow me. My mother found me later, near the end of the reception. She had had 2 glasses of wine, which was when she got soft. Not apologetic exactly, but softer, like the edges of her were less Certain. She said, I heard you talk to Rochelle. I said, I did. She said, I think she felt bad. I said she didn't seem like she felt bad. My mother was quiet. She looked out at the dance floor where my stepfather was doing something that was not quite dancing with my cousin's father-in-law. Then she said, I should have called you back faster. I had expected. I don't know what I had expected. An apology that reached the level of the thing. An acknowledgement of what it actually was, what it cost me, what it would have been like to be 22 years old instead of 31, or to have had less money in my purse, or to have made different choices about who to trust on the side of the road. I had expected her to see it. She didn't see it, she never has. That was the other thing I understood that weekend. Standing in a hotel ballroom in Nashville, with a glass of sparkling cider, while my stepfather danced badly, and my mother looked at me like she was waiting for me to let her off the hook. She wasn't going to see it. Not because she was a monster. She wasn't a monster. She was a person with her own blind spots and her own reasons. But because seeing it would cost her something she wasn't willing to pay. I said, I know, Mom. I hugged her because I did still love her. Love and understanding are not the same thing. 3 weeks after the wedding, I gave notice at my apartment in Columbus. I found a room in a house with 3 other women in Cincinnati, close enough that I wasn't running, far enough that I wasn't available for the version of myself they wanted me to be. I packed my car over 2 days. I didn't ask for help. Not because I didn't have people I could have asked, but because I wanted to know I could do it on my own. I could. The night before I left, I drove past the house. My mother's house, my stepfather's house. The house I'd spent 22 years walking into and feeling slightly like a guest. The lights were on in the kitchen. I could see the shape of my mother moving around in there, making something, being ordinary. I sat outside for maybe 5 minutes. Then I drove away. I still have Helen's cardigan. Dark green, soft, a little stretched at the cuffs from how many times I've worn it since November. I think about her sometimes. About the 2 of them, Gerald and Helen in their Buick smelling like cinnamon. A woman I'd known for 90 minutes handing me her sweater like it was nothing. Like of course. Like that's what you do. I think about Wanda at the Welcome Center, writing her phone number on a map in blue pen. I think about how many strangers did more for me in 8 hours than people who'd known me my whole life had done in years. I think. That's a thing worth knowing about the world. That it contains those people. That they exist on rest stops and in Cracker Barrels and behind information desks, and sometimes they find you when you need finding. I'm in Cincinnati now. The nonprofit job is good, meaningful in the way I'd hoped. The kind of work that makes you feel like your particular combination of skills is actually suited to something. My roommates are good. Last month I went to a pottery class alone on a Saturday, and I made something lopsided and terrible, and I laughed about it on the drive home, by myself at ease. My mother calls every week or 2. I answer, mostly. We talk about small things. She has never said what happened on I-40 was wrong. I have stopped waiting for her to. My cousin calls more often. Last week she said, you seem different. I asked her different how. She thought about it for a minute and said, lighter, like you put something down. She's right, I did. I just didn't know I'd been carrying it, until the night I was standing in a parking lot in the cold, watching someone I loved choose to drive away. And the road ahead was dark and unknown and entirely mine.